people with.
We have one viewer waiting. Is that anybody?
Oh, should I keep my legs closed if we can?
Probably.
Yeah. Huh.
No.
Okay.
The edge of the table is right at the base of the shot.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we are live. This is every other
Live.
Wednesday. Yeah, live.
All right, good.
On the internet. This is
Sweet.
the Doctors Who podcast. My name is Chris.
I'm Chip.
I'm Brian. Last I checked.
And today we're going to be talking about some beer. And we're also going to be jumping in and discussing the first 13 chapters of The Name of the Wind, the debut fantasy novel from Patrick Rothfuss.
Yes.
Now,
I thought we were discussing Gone with the Wind.
oh,
Brian.
My bad.
did you do it again?
My
Okay.
bad. But I came prepared anyway for this, so we'll see how it goes.
All right.
Okay.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. So why don't we first take a step back and discuss beer? We do this every time. We have a beer, we drink the beer, we talk about the beer. But this time there's a little something different. Different. Yeah.
Different is good.
Different is good.
Should be a campaign.
So
of some
basically,
sort.
basically, this is Wild Range Brewing Company India Pale Ale. Now, I did some research and some reading on this IPA because normally I like to go in and I like to see where the brewery is, how long they've been in existence. As it turns out, this brewery actually doesn't exist.
That's peculiar.
It is.
Is it a multiverse?
Kind of, I think. So it is a subsidiary of a company called World Brews, which is a subsidiary of Winery Exchange, which is this global entity that sources beer, wine, and spirits.
It's very mysterious.
Yeah,
Subsidiaries within subsidiaries.
right. Shell corporations, the whole works,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
Is it Hydra?
Are you
It
sure
might
this
be.
is actually still beer?
No, I'm not.
All right.
So, but as it turns out, the beers from Wild Range are brewed through they call it like a contractor brewery or a contracted brewery. So this Wild Range Brewing Company IPA is actually brewed by a brewery called Genesee Brewing Company, which is in New York, I think. So basically they go and they brew beers and then they slap the Wild Range Brewing Company label on them. They also brew under Trouble Brewing Company for Walmart, and they also brew under Big Flats for Walgreens. I was unaware that Walgreens sold
Walgreens
beer.
has their own
Interesting.
Yeah.
label.
Right. So yeah, just kind of going in. Then I did some other searching on Genesee Brewing because I went down the rabbit hole. I wasn't quite ready to come out. So Genesee is owned by Florida Ice and Farm Company, which is based in San Jose, Costa Rica.
Why wouldn't it be?
Farm in San Jose, Costa Rica.
And
In Florida, you don't really think of ice nor farms.
Right.
No,
yeah.
but-
Yeah. So I mean,
Or Costa Rica for that.
Well, yeah.
if we look at this
all sorts
though,
of messed up.
Yeah.
let's take a pan back to the bottle. It's actually kind of a cool label, because you've got like this hipster man in old timey garb with a pair of wolves on his shoulders. You know,
It looks like
it's
an old timey boxer.
like a
dude.
boxer.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a better way to put it. So it's really, I mean, I saw this, I got this at Aldi,
Yeah.
and we were just walking by, and I was like, oh, it looks like a craft brewery produced an IPA, and Aldi is selling it, and it was $6.99, so I thought, why not? So this is what we're gonna try tonight.
Why not? Actually, this kind of fits in with our theme of tonight as well. When
What's
I
that?
look at it, it kind of looks like even maybe I could see a circus performer.
Oh, yeah.
That's true.
I could see like someone part of a troupe.
Some sort of an entertainer?
Yes.
Performer? Thank you
Interesting.
So yeah, that was my rabbit hole today. I kind of went down
Cool.
there and just did some. I found out my employer does have some restrictions on alcohol and beer related websites. But it's not global. It's only like the big ones, it seems. So, I was still able to get to like ratemybeer.com and Beer Advocate and some of these other things, but I couldn't get to the like the pages for World Brews and Winery Exchange. Blocked. Couldn't get there. But anyway, it was yeah. Wow, this is hot. Sorry. So I have upgraded my machine. So we've now got a MacBook Pro running.
Nice.
We're using OBS as our encoder. And man, it is making the fan just spin, and it's like warm to the touch. So hopefully we don't like burn out halfway through the stream. I would be upset.
Yes.
So, I have been lax. I have not scanned yet. Have you guys?
I did.
So what do we have for how many people have rated this, and what's the average rating?
12,000 check-ins. Average rating of 3.21.
Okay, that's not bad. I've never checked this in, and I don't have any friends that have checked
Looks
this
like
in.
it's a 6.9% ABV and 65 IBU.
Well, I think it's time to drink.
Yeah.
All right,
Enough of the numbers.
gentlemen.
Cheers.
Smells hoppy. It's hoppy.
It's hoppy.
Mm-hmm.
There's bitterness there. I'm also getting more malt than I usually get from
Yeah.
an IPA.
And that goes with some of the profiles here. Hoppy, malty.
Okay, yeah. Sweet. So this is out of a bottle. I am with Brian and Chip. Hoppy, yes. Malty, I wouldn't say smooth or light. It tastes like strong. It tastes boozy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you said it was what? 6 point something?
6.9%.
6.9. So, I mean, that's... Yeah. That's not super boozy, but it sure tastes like it. So, I'm going to take my picture real quick. I'm going to check this in. I think I'm going to go 3.5. What about you guys?
Oh, I might err a little bit lower on this. I'm getting a lot of malty, which I normally like malty, but I'm getting a little bit more malty than I would normally expect in an IPA, which is different. But I might end up going with 3.25 on this one.
Okay.
I'm probably more in the line with Brian. I'm not always a fan of the really hoppy beers, so I think I'm gonna go 3.25 as well.
It looks like we also have a couple of people that have joined us on YouTube.
Fantastic.
So, sweet.
Welcome.
Please use the chat function. Feel free to chime in. I've got it all right here, so we will know if you say something. I unlocked a badge. Land of the Free, level 42.
42. Wow. It's the answer to life, the universe, and everything.
That's right. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy says so.
It also says that my liver is the strongest muscle in my body. So there we go.
Liver and muscle.
Mine is.
Okay.
Apparently.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Why don't we switch gears and move into the book? This is something kind of new for us. We have reviewed and discussed TV shows. We've reviewed and discussed movies. We've never really ventured into literature before. So we're now on, month 13 of doing this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So this is kind of new ground. The book we've chosen is The Name of the Wind, which you've doubtlessly figured out if you've clicked on the video because it says so right on the thumbnail. But this was just, we could have gone into something like Tolkien. We could have gone into something like Robert Jordan, which would have taken us 14 books to get through. That seemed like maybe a little bit more than we should be chewing off, I think.
Like Livecast phase 3 or 4, maybe.
Yeah. So
I think this one's a fun choice too, since it has been greenlit for a movie made out of the books and a prequel series on Showtime that I guess, precedes the story in the books. So
Interesting.
And
I'd like to
so
cast
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's like, I think the tail end of our discussion is who do we envision in these roles, right?
Mm-hmm. Dead or alive.
Dead or alive, yeah.
Because the person I want is dead. But
Oh.
anyway.
Well, all right. So
Why,
this was...
why Chris is still alive and he's right there.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Present company excluded.
Yeah,
How about
exactly.
that?
Yeah. So this was published in March 27th of 2007, to be exact, by... I'm not sure if it's DAW Books or DAW Books here in the States. It's written by Patrick Rothfuss. He wrote this over a 9-year span during his advance toward his BS in English. There was an excerpt from this novel that was released as a short story in 2002, which did win the Writers of the Future Award that year.
Nice.
So this is, I think, just something to anybody out there who's like, oh yeah, I could write a book.
Well, I
He
think
wrote this thing over...
Well, it's pretty obvious too
9
when you
years.
read it. The language and just the structure of the story, that you can tell he put a lot of time and effort into this.
absolutely.
It does not read like a debut novel.
It doesn't. And also, not just that, but just like the dialogue is so sharp.
Mm-hmm.
It's very,
And
very
like,
quick.
the magic system in here
Yeah.
is like really
It feels tangible.
well thought out and
And
defined.
defined, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Like this to me sort of has a feel of a well-created dungeon. Like if you're doing D&D or you're doing something like this, feels like it is in that same sort of vein. A very well-constructed world with very set mechanics.
Now, the place where your metaphor falls... Was that a metaphor or a simile? Whichever. Anyway.
Yeah.
Is
I
that...
said the word like. I think it's a simile.
I think you're right.
So it says
Using
English
like or
major.
as. Like or as. But where the analogy kind of falls apart is that a dungeon master or a game master never knows what the characters are going to do.
True.
Whereas an author can...
Especially with certain players.
Right.
You know,
Yes. Like building a trebuchet in an engine room or creating...
practicing necromancy in the Star Trek universe.
Right.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah. So it's... Yeah, it is really thought out very well. After publishing, it also did win 4 awards here in the U.S. and others internationally that I didn't account for here. But in 2007, it won the Quill Award and the Best Book of the Year award. The Best Book of the Year was by, Publishers Weekly. So it wasn't
So
like
it's a big deal.
universal best book, but
No,
sure.
but Publishers Weekly is still a big deal.
It is. And then in 2008, it won a couple. It won the Alex Award. So the Alex Award annually recognizes 10 books for adults that would have special appeal to young adults ages 12 to 18.
Nice.
And then...
I wonder who Alex was.
I don't know.
First name, last name.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting.
And then the Reader's Choice Award in 2008 by SF Site, which is a science fiction online magazine. I believe they've maybe stopped publication at this point. But
Might just be online.
back
only.
There's a
then-
few that have. So.
Yeah. But that is, pretty
quite a list.
impressive
Yeah.
for a debut novel.
Yeah. Thanks
Oh,
for
yeah.
doing all that research too. I didn't even know most of that.
I kind of like, that's kind of like my thing, is I like to go and I like to find like trivia
Yeah.
or little known facts or like things about how something was
Hey,
produced.
did you know
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Right.
Hey guys, did you know?
He's a
So,
regular Cliff Clavin for
right, yeah.
Cheers
Yeah.
fans.
So, kind of as we talked about, we're doing like the first 13 chapters of this. And if you guys can see, my bookmark is here, which means we still have
It's
A long
roughly
road.
600 or 700 page book.
A long
And we're,
road to
We're about
hoe.
100 pages in, roughly.
The
Yeah.
7. We roughly finished about a seventh of the book so
Yeah.
far.
Well, you are the numbers person,
And
so
1/7 is roughly 14.2%. Someone can correct me on that.
Sounds good to me.
I don't know.
so as all fantasy novels do, this one has a book, or a map at the beginning of the book.
Not a very detailed map.
Not a very detailed one, and it also looks a little too mass-produced for my tastes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the maps in the beginning of the Wheel of Time, or into some of the Tolkien books that are behind my head.
Or Song of Ice and Fire.
Right.
Really
I mean, the
detailed
maps looked like they come from that time period.
I'm trying to think, because some of the early editions of like the Game of Thrones stuff, I thought the maps, they get more detailed as you go along in the books. So as the story fills out, kind of like the credits in the show, it starts to kind of flesh things out a little bit more. Yeah. So maybe by the time the third book, which is forthcoming, there's no publication date yet, but maybe we'll get a more detailed map. But the way the story is structured, you don't refer to the map a lot. There's some movement between places, but a lot of it you can just draw the conclusion in your head as to, they traveled to a place.
So one thing I noticed right off the bat when you hit the prologue is it's 1 page long. I mean, it is...
Is that the silence of 3 parts?
Yes.
Oh, that's
Threes kind of play a part in this too, or the number 3. So there's the 3 parts. There's 3 days that it takes to tell his story. There's when he actually gets into beginning his story and telling Chronicler, there's 3 beginnings to his story.
Right.
So there's, I don't know if that was intended or not. It just was kind of cool.
He seems like he's planned everything else out. So
it took him 9 years to write it.
But in the prologue is where we're first introduced to the innkeeper of the Waystone Inn, and he is a man called, I'm not sure if it's Kote or Kote.
I almost thought it was Kvothe, because in one spelling the author gave us the reference of Quothe, and so.
But that was for the Kvothe character.
Oh, that was
Kvothe.
You're right. You're right.
And I thought, from a rhyming standpoint, or kind of a rhyming, it would be Kote, because it rhymes closer with Kvothe.
Sure.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So for
open to interpretation.
Yeah.
For
and it's 1 syllable as opposed to Kote, which is 2.
True.
So it's hard to say.
For Kvothe, I did some research on the pronunciation, and so Patrick Rothfuss referenced the Yiddish word kvetch as kind of the same KV sound at the beginning, and then he said the O is like whole or roll, and then the E is silent. So from there I get kind of a Kvothe.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Now, if you're out there and you're watching and you're saying, God, no, you're wrong, that's what the comments are for. I am happy to be wrong. I'm used to being wrong. I've been married for almost 15 years.
Congratulations.
So, yeah.
That was one of, when Harry Potter came out, I read the first 3 books before the first movie came out, and the entire time and this was before the internet was widely available.
Right.
So I was pronouncing it Hermione, which, can you believe how awful that sounded?
Hermione.
Well, and I've done that with, like, Wheel of Time I've read so many times, and, like, some of the names, like, Nineve and Egwene were a little difficult. I mean, but there's so many
Egwene and Nineve, but I don't know. I'm sure we all pronounce them different ways.
There's a glossary in there we could probably refer to, but that's maybe for a different podcast.
That's not this book.
No, it's definitely not. So chapter 1 is called A Place for Demons. And this is where you have these people in the inn, and you have this man named Old Cobb telling his story, right? And through this you kind of get, that this is a small town, it's a sleepy town, not much happens, you don't get a lot going through, but that the roads have become dangerous. But what this also does is it firmly establishes that this is going to hold on to some fantasy staples and tropes that some people would probably say are overused. Like, this is essentially medieval Europe.
Yeah.
You've got kind of these exotic sounding fantasy names that seem to permeate the genre. And then I had a third point, but it's gone. But this really sets the stage that things have been not as well off as they have in the past. And they also start to lay the foundation that maybe this innkeeper isn't quite who he claims to be or pretends to be as well. And I think they do a great job of that.
Yeah.
I mean, they kind of like lay these little nuggets out here and there.
He plants a lot of seeds throughout there that, and I've read the book. This is my 3rd time through it. Brian, I believe this is your first
first,
time reading it. And Chris, you've read it at least once.
This is my second time through, so we've got like a gamut here.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're probably catching things that you didn't catch.
Yeah,
the
there's
first
a lot of
two.
layers and things in there, and there's seeds that, knowing where the story goes, it's like,
Right.
oh wow, I didn't realize he planted that,
Yeah.
that early on in the story,
Mhm.
or that this is really that's going to play a bigger part later. So it's
Yeah.
kind of fun to read it through
Well,
Yeah.
again and again.
Even I just opened it up and I realized that the Chandrian was listed in like what
page,
first, second,
page
Yeah,
one.
they introduce it
Yeah.
right away.
fifth paragraph.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, well, all right. Well, that obviously becomes a bigger deal later.
Mm-hmm. And it'll even become a bigger deal after where we stopped at
Yeah.
chapter 13.
So
Sure.
yeah, when we live
Not just
cast
spoiling.
the next set of chapters in 2 weeks,
Yeah.
they'll have a big part to play.
They will.
Nice.
I found it interesting too, and knowing Kvothe's character, as you get into more of his backstory, and he talks about being a traveling performer and musician, that the story opens up with this whole silence in the end. That there's no music, there's no singing, there's no sounds.
Yeah.
And for a musician and for a
Yeah.
performer, that it was such a big part of his childhood
Sure.
life.
Very
And
dreary.
it plays a huge part. I mean, even beyond what
Mhm.
we've read so far, that to have the inn is silent and quiet
Yeah.
and kind of foreboding. Just it goes back to the whole, well, these times something's
Mhm.
happening
Mm-hmm.
in these times that's dangerous or things are changing. So
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting, I think.
Yeah. But as we're getting further in this, and old Cobb is telling his story, a man named Carter comes in.
Mhm.
And he's like cut up, he's bleeding, he's bloody.
See the blacksmith apprentice, or I can't remember if that was him or if that was somebody else, but doesn't matter.
Yeah, one of them. It was either Copper Carter was the blacksmith. I can't remember.
Yeah. But he dropped this bundle, like something bundled into a blanket onto a table.
Mm-hmm.
And turns out that it's basically this giant beetly spider thing.
Yep.
Stone.
It's like razor sharp.
Yep.
Yeah. So very very quickly, by page 6 or 7, we're getting into the very fantasy element, small town, something's going wrong,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
It's one of those things that fantasy books seem to lean on.
Yeah.
Which is not a criticism.
No.
I just want to point that out. And this is where you start to get the glimmer that the innkeeper is more than he seems, because
Mhm.
Patrick Rothfuss is laying, again, these little seeds that
Mhm.
he knows what this is.
Yeah, so the innkeeper knows what it is and kind of knows how to deal with it, but he lets the townsfolk kind of believe that
Mhm.
it's a demon, that it's
Mhm.
something that it may or may not be. But he has it. It causes him to worry that, I can't remember if he says it in this chapter, but he couldn't believe that these Skraelings have traveled this far west already.
Mhm.
It's-
Yeah.
So something, he knows them from his past.
Well, he's got a I don't know if it's an apprentice or a student.
Mm-hmm.
That's
by
a
the
character
name-
we need to talk about too.
This would
Bast.
this is
yeah.
probably a good time to do it,
Mhm.
Sure.
because he goes up and he's talking to Bast about the
Yeah.
Skraeling, right?
I believe Bast is a fae. Is that what they call him? Like a.
So I went through and I read, and I was going to ask for some clarification because I wasn't sure I actually followed that whole interaction. But maybe we
I
need
thought
to.
it was fae, which FAE, but I don't know
Yep.
if that's like. I
Okay.
can't remember if it's like the Fairloon or the fairy
Mhm.
type. Some sort of a supernatural being.
Right.
Basically.
Yeah. But you don't really get an inkling of that until much later.
No, because he is able to basically pass himself off as human,
Right. Right.
until the right people, if you look at him the right way, or somebody that knows what they're looking at, which comes into
Yeah.
play later.
Yep.
It can see him for what he is.
Right. So I think a couple things happen before we get down to the meat of this thing and to where it really starts to centrally drive the main story that's being
Mhm.
told here. You've got the fact that the innkeeper is getting basically like a finished sword display delivered to
Mhm.
him. And Bast is like dismayed that he's going to hang this thing
Mhm.
in the bar where everybody can see it. And then you've also got him out visiting the blacksmith and asking for like the old
Big
blacksmithing
leather
yeah.
apron
Yep.
and
gloves
like the
and-
gloves and
a piece of iron.
a piece of iron.
Yeah.
Um,
They talk about iron a lot
they do.
in the
Yeah.
book.
They do.
Wondering if there's any sort of basis for that, but
Mhm.
sorry, I'll let you continue.
But at this point, I think it's about the time that we shift perspectives to this man traveling on the road.
Yeah, so the first chapter kind of introduces the Skraeling and this
Mhm.
backstory, and then the second chapter, I believe, goes right out to this man traveling on the road that basically gets mugged. You know.
But it's not really mugged
No,
because he's not hurt.
he isn't
So
hurt.
it's like the army or the soldiers,
Yeah,
right?
they're basically,
basically like
taking what they need.
taking what they need to continue to survive and serve. And so they're just like going through his stuff and they're saying, oh, well, we don't need that. Let him
Mhm.
keep that.
And I thought this did a great job of establishing another character because,
Mhm.
you know, you go through all this and you're like, oh man, too bad the guy's lost pretty much everything. And then he's got money hidden different places and all
Right.
these provisions kind of hidden, you know, so he
Yep.
was ready
Yeah, like
to travel on
he's,
the road,
he's
or he's
hiding
used to traveling on the
silver in his
road.
ink
Yeah.
bottle or things
So
like
he,
that. Yeah.
he knew what he was getting into.
Mhm.
So there's more to him. He's more worldly
Right.
than he seems at the
Right.
at the very first pages.
But it turns out that after the army takes his horse and most everything else he had, he can't buy another horse because animals are so rare. So he ends
Yeah.
up walking the road, which we found in the first chapter is a bad idea.
yeah.
You don't want to be walking the road, especially
Right.
at night.
Mhm.
So he comes across, or he sees like a fire off in
Oh,
the
yeah.
distance,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, "Well, I'm hungry and kind of cold and tired, so what the heck?"
Yeah.
Probably not the best decision he made, but you
Well,
know, it actually might have been the best
it might
decision
have
he
been,
made.
yeah.
Now that I
Probably
think
not a bad
about
decision.
it. It's this hooded man
Mm-hmm.
who is basically baiting the Skraelings.
Mm-hmm.
And what was it? Were there 5 of them? I
Five of
think?
them.
Yeah, there were
Yeah.
5 of them.
The
And he
whole
was
hive.
using the leg that he took off of the Skraeling that was brought into the end to help
Mhm.
lure them in.
Yeah. So it the secondary character that we meet,
Mhm.
have we referred to him as the chronicler yet or no?
I don't think we know
Not
him as a
yet.
chronicler until they get back
Until
to
they
the
get
end.
into the end.
Yep.
But
And they didn't even, in that chapter, they didn't even, based on the kind of knowledge from the first chapter, you knew that it was Kvothe,
Mhm.
but I don't even think it mentions him by name in that
Right.
chapter. That
Right.
It's just this
yeah.
Just the hooded
man
figure.
and
Yeah.
the
Yep.
figure and the fire and the
So basically,
stuff.
the traveler gets knocked out.
Mhm.
He comes to.
Yeah, for being worldly and kind of aware of the dangers of the road, he seemed pretty inept in the battle.
Yeah.
And especially with what happens towards the end of our read tonight, you know, in his encounter with
Mhm.
Bast,
Yeah.
he was pretty quick to defend himself for going the offensive, but
Yep.
he was worthless with the Skraeling for some reason.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yep.
That's a good point. I didn't put that together, but it's yeah.
And I think there's more to this character than we
Mhm.
have seen thus far.
Definitely. So fast forward, the hooded man takes him back to the
Waystone.
Waystone
yeah.
Inn, where Kote and Bast are basically caring for him. And the man, when he comes down, pretty much immediately recognizes Kote as Kvothe. Is that what we
Mhm.
decided on?
Yeah.
And this isn't the first time he's been recognized, though.
No.
Because earlier in chapter 1, somebody was like, "Hey, I think you're
Kvothe, the
Kvothe."
Bloodless.
Yeah. And
So
like,
where you defeated some dude and
yeah.
ruined the cobblestones and they can never be repaired. And
Yeah, and
And I saw you
so
perform.
he
Yeah.
pretended to like fall and hurt his knee,
and then Bast, I think,
and then
drugged
Bast
the
like
guy,
drugged him
and-
so he wouldn't remember. I mean, it was pretty well done. But
Mhm,
but
mhm.
right away, this guy's like, "Oh, you're exactly who I'm looking for."
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it
But Kvothe this time didn't really. He kind of pushed back a little bit, but he didn't hide
he
the
didn't-
fact of who he
no,
was.
no.
So,
Mm-hmm.
because I think he knew that he couldn't.
yeah.
Well, and also, I mean, fame recognizes fame, but the chronicler had been very well known throughout the land as well.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
you know, it's kind of
Yeah.
Yeah.
kind of his chance to show
Both
off.
knew who this guy was.
Yeah.
Yes.
And is it Scarpy?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the name that he uses.
Referenced. Yeah.
I loved the breakdown of how the chronicler is able to write so quickly.
I know.
Just some of the details.
I want to
were
be
just-
able to do that. Like whatever shorthand he developed.
Yeah, so like
Yeah.
this shorthand, so he could like almost take notes like verbatim faster than people could say them,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think it did a couple of things. It kind of illustrated that, hey, this is a super intelligent man.
Mhm.
But then when Kvothe was able to basically break his cipher in 15 minutes,
Mhm.
you're like, oh,
They're dealing with two very clever
Yes.
individuals.
yeah.
Yeah, I liked how he broke it down and just whatever the sounds that make up the
Like,
Yeah.
like
language that they
vowels
spoke.
were
that-
like vertical strikes, and then,
Yep.
yeah,
it just made sense.
and
But that's the way the
again,
magic, when he describes magic and sympathy later on, it
Yeah.
just feels very tangible and real.
yeah.
It's
very organic.
Somebody should be able to do that.
But this man is the chronicler, and he wants Kvothe's story.
Yep.
And after some haggling, I guess,
Mhm.
and some conversation, Kvothe says yes, but it's going to take me 3 days to do it.
Yeah.
And this kind of goes back to the title of the book, The Name
Mhm.
of the Wind, the Kingkiller Chronicle, Day 1.
Mm.
So A Wise Man's Fear is Day 2, Day 3, not yet published.
Mm.
So you've got one book for each of these
I think
days.
it's like the Doors of Time or something.
Is it?
I can't remember the name of it, but it's.
Hey,
he's got a title
We've got
for
a
it.
Door of Time right here.
That's right.
Actually, I told Chris that I kind of felt like this had a sort of Zelda sort of feel to it.
Yeah,
like
Legend of Zelda. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it kind of feels like maybe a little bit of Breath of the Wild, but yeah, you talk about the Doors of Time, and it was like, all right, that kind of plays into it as well. It just, there's just so many good little nuggets that you find along the way. Just, everything from like the bottle that Kvothe is polishing during parts of the story, just great detail.
But so Kvothe basically sits down to tell his story, and Chip, like you mentioned, he starts 3 times.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
He's like starts
Starts with a woman, then it starts at the university, then he goes back to, well, it's really what led me to the university,
Right.
where we should start. So.
and the traveling people that he's a member of as a child, the Adima Rue.
That's how I said it. I don't know.
I mean, it kind of reminds me of like the Tinkers from Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
And basically, almost like, I don't want to say gypsy because
That has a
No,
negative
I mean, it
connotation
does,
to it.
it does.
It
But
has
it's,
they had.
it's a cultural thing. It's a people, and to just like label,
Yeah, but
you know,
it's more like a legitimized, authorized version.
Well, and what
of,
does he say in the book too? Is it's not every performer is a Dimaru. That they're like the cream of the crop, and
right.
and they had a very wealthy patron that funded
Mhm.
a lot of their travels. And that they were
But his
highly
father,
renowned in
his
their
father and his
skills.
mother basically ran this troupe,
Mm-hmm.
and so he learned all about like storytelling and acrobatics and all of these things.
Yeah, and painting scenery and just doing
Right.
everything that it took to put a performance or a show together.
Mm-hmm.
And there is one town they go to where the mayor is adamant that they're not even in the city until he realizes who their sponsor is.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this other man who's also in town at the same time that
The Arcanist.
The Arcanist that Kvothe
Mm-hmm.
eavesdrops on a conversation between this man and the mayor,
Mhm.
and he sees the man do something he can't explain.
Yeah.
He calls the name of the wind, which is probably confusing if you haven't read this, but
Yeah.
but this is
Actually, it kind of reminded me of the episode with Tennant and Martha where they go back with the witches in the Shakespearean time.
Ooh, yeah.
So like the ability of a name to have power over something.
right. Yeah.
So that's kind of what I got from
Yeah.
that was
Right.
he was able to summon the wind based on.
Yeah, and that's another kind of thread throughout this is that names are very important, and knowing the name of something is
Knowing
having
the name
power
of the
over
thing
that
is having
thing.
power over it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to take a crack at explaining how the magic works? How sympathy works? Because I'm not sure I can do it justice, and you're one more read into it than I am. So you can pass. You can take a hard pass.
I can try. From what I
ask.
remember of it, and I just read it again.
Yeah.
But it has to do with, the names are important, but there's also properties that bind things together, and some things are more closely related to others. So like stone can be bound together. You can bind iron and stone because iron is mined from stone, but binding like iron and water is extremely difficult.
Sure.
So there's kind of different ways that Ben teaches Kvothe on how he can use things to, make water boil by binding the heat from a stone with the element of water.
Right.
And things like that. But it's all, it feels very scientifically based.
It really does.
It feels very tangible and real. It's like,
oh,
why can't I do that?
Right. I mean, I should be able to just
doesn't
grab
feel
some
like
pine pitch and give it a shot.
Right. So when we talked about like the Wheel of Time, they got the one power, and it's very mysterious and otherworldly, and it's never really explained. But this one, Rothfuss goes into great detail explaining just how some of the sympathetic magic, or the sympathy is what they call it. It's basically the feelings and the bindings between objects,
between things,
and how you can use that to control them.
Nice work. I'm just going to take a moment. It looks like we still have a couple people out here that are watching. I want to invite you to please use the chat function. We would love to hear any comments as we're going along, any questions, or maybe you've written a song and you'd like to share the lyrics. I don't know.
Or
but
if we're
whatever.
just dead wrong and you disagree.
Right, that too, because that happens
a lot.
Yeah. I'd like to pick your guys' brains about how some of the sympathy works as well. And again, feel free to jump in, whoever's listening. But I was really intrigued by the scene where Ben was saying, "Make this rock float," and then he would drop the rock.
And that's another thing that he brings up too that we'll get to in a minute. But go ahead.
Okay.
With your question.
So just kind of a background. So Ben drops the rock, and before he drops it, he says, "What will this rock do after I let go? Convince yourself it will float."
Right. Or go up or something like
that.
Yeah.
Which goes to the alar, I believe he called it. So it was like basically the controlling your mind and compartmentalizing your mind and truly
like
believing
this deep
that
conviction that this is going to happen, right? And it's also like some of the games that I don't mean to like
you're good.
But like some of the the mental exercises that Ben has him doing.
Yeah, where he's like hiding something
where he's
from
like
another
hiding
part of his mind.
From another part of his mind. Where
Yeah.
he didn't actually hide it, but he wanted to see how long it would take the other person or the other part of his mind to figure out that he hadn't hit it.
And I don't want to jump way far ahead, but that brings me to a point that hiding as Kote, the innkeeper, has he used some of that alar to basically convince himself that he's this innkeeper and he's hiding certain powers that he may have developed or certain things that he may have done from himself? Because there's a lot of references to I just don't feel like I'm myself, or I don't remember myself. I don't.
Well, and
so
when
I don't know if there's some of that
when Chronicler confronts Kvothe in the inn, and he becomes a different person.
Yeah, that depending on where he's looking, that he looks like this healthy, couldn't be more than 25, and then he looks older and kind of wilted. I think was the term that they used. But sorry, I don't want to take you away from your question.
But carry on, Brian.
That's a great point. But I was just getting at from what I've seen of this author, he seems to be really driving the point that there are multiple ways to approach the world around you. But I guess I was just curious to see what your thoughts were on, I don't know, maybe it's probably not fair since I haven't read it and you guys have, but
anything's fair. Well, most anything.
Sorry, my mind went somewhere else just for a second. But I guess really it was... Where was I going with that?
Have a drink, it'll help. Did it help?
Maybe I'll need another one.
Okay.
Well, one of the things, or one of the quotes from the book is, "Don't believe everything you read in stories." I can't remember which character said it.
Yes.
But then there's things that I think Chronicler said he went in search of the Dracus, like a dragon, and just found a big lizard. So that maybe there's this big story around something that ends up not really being that big of a story. That it's, But I don't know if you're going where you want to go with the magic or the discussion, but it just feels very elemental and very
but it was also interesting that he was so conflicted with the ability to believe multiple things at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess ever since one science fiction trope that I've seen, which is probably underutilized, but the ability to see both sides and nothing at the same time, like I don't know, like the holodeck or like just. Mm-hmm. I'm really interested to see where the author is going with that storyline, because it seems like you have two forces even within the same person that are fighting opposing viewpoints. And I think you probably, I don't know if it was spoiler or not, but like just the ability for him to maybe compartmentalize himself into being that innkeeper. There's something that just doesn't seem quite right about this.
Yeah.
Another thing I thought was really cool as you're going through all these things that Ben is teaching him is how Kvothe basically is like, he's like, I see now that he was preparing me and he was getting me ready for so many things. And I'm trying to remember if there's anything else specifically that we want to call out before we get to kind of that last conversation that we read between Ben and Kvothe's parents.
Yeah.
I don't. Nothing else is jumping out at me. You've got.
I'm trying to remember
some comprehensive notes.
A few notes, but
Oh yeah. Yep.
One interesting thing. That this kind of goes before he starts telling his story, but all the names that Kvothe has, or that people have called him, at different times, and he says that all these names were earned and paid for, or bought and paid for. So he had the flame, the thunder, the broken tree. Alir is what Ben called him, which had to do with some. I assume it's like a student or clever. It says because Ben knew he was clever that he called him that. Dulator, he says, was by his first lover. Shadikar, Lightfinger, Six String, Kvothe the Bloodless, Kvothe the Arcane, and Kvothe the Kingkiller. So he's got a lot of different names that he's been called through the years, and we really don't know how old he is. I don't think it's ever said. It said that he looks no more than 25 in one scene, but then he looks older and wilted in another.
Right.
So we really don't have a frame of reference as to how long ago some of these things have happened. But if the kid in the inn recognized him and said that he saw him sing somewhere, it can't be that long ago that
that he was that's
Kvothe.
true.
So.
And kind of to that point with like all the names and things like that, as I was going through and doing some research today, I encountered several reviews that just basically were just like ripping this up and down, because it's like the prologue was like like 3 types of silence, and like the main protagonist has all these nicknames, and it's a clone of medieval Europe, and the names are, I mean, it's like come on, if you don't want to read fantasy, or if you want to read fantasy that isn't like all this fantasy, go write some. That's what Tolkien did. Him, C.S. Lewis, and who was the
not Chesterton, but
might have been actually.
I know the 3 of them were.
Yeah, but they were basically the Inklings were basically like, you know what, the kinds of stories we want to hear don't exist, so let's write them. If you're that upset about people using a genre that has proven to be effective, then go out and do your own thing. That's not a criticism, by the way. That's a call to action. We use that term at work a lot.
Call to action.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah. That's a trope.
Have you ever?
That is an overused trope. So is a mission statement.
Oh yeah.
Oh, so have you guys?
The art of the possible.
Can I take this like on a side conversation just for like 30
We
seconds?
never do that.
Sure, yeah.
Just
this once.
This reminds me of all this wording of trope, mission statement, objective. Like if you guys have ever played Workplace Bingo, if you haven't, I'd highly recommend it. So that's where you come up with 5 or 6 variations of the same buzzwords, and then see after a big department meeting if you can get a bingo.
Like, let's take this offline.
Yeah.
Yep, offline synergy.
Lessons learned.
Ooh.
Yes.
Yeah.
We could put that in the parking lot.
That one I haven't heard since I left Big Blue.
Yeah. I still hear it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know you do.
I'm still there.
Anyway,
Jira and move forward.
Yeah.
yeah. So the last major scene that we get, I think, before we stopped was Ben sitting down with Kvothe's parents and Kvothe.
This is where Kvothe kind of eavesdrops on their conversation.
Yeah.
And they talk about 2 important things.
They do. So Kvothe's father, basically, he likes to go research something and then build these epic songs from what he's been able to find, and it's very important to him that he gets everything exactly right.
Yep.
And he has been researching the Chandrian for 2 seasons. I think they said. And he's asking Ben because Ben might know some things that he doesn't, and this is the part where the exposition feels a little forced to me.
A little bit.
Because, like, just some of the questions and, like, the lead-ins that Kvothe's father uses, I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
It's forgivable, and I'm able to move on, but those are just a couple places where I'm like, it feels like it's a little heavy-handed. But basically, it's basically a vehicle for Kvothe to have this knowledge about certain aspects of the Chandrian, right? And then I think the second piece was...
It's more about Kvothe himself and his intelligence and ability and, heading to...
How he's exceptional,
he should go to the
basically.
university and that he's got a big future ahead of him should they help him on that path.
Yeah. And he's not saying do this one thing. He's like, you know what? He could be this. He could be that.
Yep.
He could go to the university and he'd be great, but he could do almost anything in Excel. So that, And then I think we zip back to the present where they're back in the inn, and Kvothe says something along the lines of, brace yourselves, the story takes a turn now. Downward, darker, clouds on the horizon. And that was the last thing I read, and I was like, ooh, this is probably a great place to stop.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of like the first chunk of this book. It basically is a great place where it sets the stage and it gets you to the point where shit's gonna go down.
Yep. And it does go down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Spoiler.
Hold on to your butts.
I won't tell you what happened.
As Samuel L. Jackson said in Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is gonna be a movie. Do we think that's the right choice?
I think for this story, I don't know, it feels like even just these first 100 pages could be a movie. Just there's so much that happens here, so
that's
they're
why
gonna have to condense it. And I assume that I don't know if they're gonna do a movie per book or if it's gonna be, I don't know.
Yeah.
I would assume that it'll be a movie per book.
I feel like this would be better treated as a series, much like Game of Thrones, much like that Amazon is doing with the Dark Tower and the Wheel of Time, and they've done with The Man in the High Castle and things like that. While The Lord of the Rings was a great trilogy of movies, so much was stripped out and changed to make it work that I wish it had taken its time and been like, one series per book, give you 10, 15, 20 episodes, tell this story over the course of 10 to 20 hours instead of 3. Right?
Well, I'll be interested to see what they do, since they've got the prequel series too that's going to be on Showtime, so it's going to be they're doing a similar thing with Dune as well, where they've got the movie coming out based on the books, but they've got another series to accompany the movie based on the Bene Gesserit. So I don't really know what the series or this prequel series is going to consist of, but I'm assuming it's his family and the troop that he traveled with, and I don't know if it's before Kvothe was born, but Lin-Manuel Miranda has been brought on to do the music for the show.
Wow.
So, we got a heavy hitter there. music's going to be an important aspect of the show.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I think it's got to surround this traveling troupe of performers, and
That'd be awesome.
maybe there's more to his parents than we know. Like,
Sure.
There's he created a world here that he hasn't really even mined that much of it, other than a couple of characters. There's a lot of ways they could take it.
Yeah. One of the things you said before we started was we should talk about like dream casting for some of these roles. I have to admit I haven't thought about it, and I don't have anybody in mind.
See, my first inkling when I read Kvothe and his description is David Bowie. I thought he just feels like David Bowie should play this guy, but he can't. So but it would have been like late 70s, early 80s David Bowie.
Sure.
But I don't know why he just stuck in my head. So that's who I see Kvothe as, and a lot of the scenes is David Bowie. But I thought for a living actor, somebody like a Willem Dafoe. But I don't know. We don't know how old Kvothe really is.
Right.
So, and I know they can do a lot with movie magic and move people up and down. But also, Sam Raimi was attached to produce or direct, and Dafoe's worked with Raimi in the past, so maybe. But those are the two for Kvothe that kind of popped in my head.
Sure.
I also thought about Tim Oliphant, maybe. But,
Oh yeah.
But maybe he'd be a better Bast. I don't know.
My first thought, if I have to go, guys, that's a great question. That's a totally fair question. My first response was, if I had to come up with someone, which I don't know how well this plays out, but like Russell Crowe from the year 2000.
Yeah.
Because all I can think of is the South Park episode where they talk about where he's fighting all over the world. Because he's essentially, he's like a mild-mannered person, like a gladiator. He's kind of like the
Did you
homebody.
say Kurt Russell or Russell Crowe?
Russell Crowe, I'm sorry.
Okay, I was like, well, hold on. What gladiator movie did you watch?
Yeah. It was way
That
different.
changes the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Russell Crowe, just because he would be the kind of the homebody who then sacrifices everything to go out and fight people.
Sounds like a Mel Gibson flick.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because you kind of need that dynamic where you can be kind of like this unassuming, mild-mannered personality, and you can just like flip a switch.
Yeah.
I mean, it's different, but you almost look at like Matt Smith or Peter Capaldi as the Doctor, how they can go from like aloof and goofy to don't mess.
Matt Smith might be good in that role.
Yeah, he could be.
Yeah.
Could be.
Yeah. We watched The Doctor's Wife last week.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
And there was just that one line where the entity was like, "Fear me, I've killed hundreds of Time Lords," and he's just like, "Fear me, I've killed all of them." I mean, just like some of the lines he's able to deliver are just
that's awesome.
on point. So yeah, maybe that could work.
It's probably got to be somebody that can sing.
That's true.
Yeah.
Or at least pretend like they're singing enough that...
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see where they go with that. What they do.
Yeah. Or maybe it's a series of actors. It's somebody for the storytelling in the end, and it's a different younger person for the
reminiscing
story.
Yeah, I can see that too.
It could be.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna continue on with chapter 14 next episode.
14 through whatever the next 100 or
Till
so pages is.
Yeah, however long we get when we find a good stopping point.
Yep.
And that's going to be in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, as you're watching this, we would love to hear your thoughts. Who do you think should play these roles? What are your thoughts of the book overall? What do you like? What don't you like? Is there anything that you read that you're just like, oh man, this part was really good, or this isn't doing it for me? We want to hear your feedback regardless of your opinion, because this here is a freedom of speech zone.
Just there?
Just right here, yeah. Over there, I don't know, because Brian's a bigot.
Wait a second.
Whoa.
Hold on. Now you're throwing big words around.
Yeah, a whole 2 syllables.
Wow.
I'm kidding. Brian's not really a bigot. Sorry.
So maybe
and we can't edit that out either. It's on
It's
on
live.
the internet forever.
So maybe we want to say chapter 14 through 26. That would be roughly the same number of pages we just read.
Cool.
Through.
I like it. But now you've said it, so we're held to it.
All right. And the next chapter, chapter 14, is the name of the wind. So I was
how apropos.
Yeah.
really tempted to read it beforehand.
I wonder what happens in that chapter.
Probably nothing.
Mm.
Probably like the least consequential chapter.
Yeah.
I wonder if Kvothe learns a good lesson. Maybe.
Nah.
All right. Everybody, thank you for tuning in, for watching. Please utilize the comments section. Find us on Instagram or Twitter at TDW Podcast. We are on Facebook, but not active on Facebook. But you can find us at facebook.com/TDW.
TDW Podcast.
That.
Nice.
And then
That's teamwork.
yeah. Then finally, our email is tdwpodcast@gmail.com. You can also go to www.tardiscast.com. It has information on what we have coming up next. It has all of our blog postings, so as we get further into this, we'll probably dive into some things that interest us. Or maybe dive into some things that are completely unrelated.
Yeah.
I've done a couple on Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, the theme park out in California. I've talked about the Star Trek Picard trailer and some of the things that we saw.
Then I've done a rewatch of Enterprise. I may put a blog out about
there you
that.
go.
I've
Nice.
started a rewatch of
Yeah.
DS9 that
Wow.
you know, I'm kind of realizing that show was really good.
It is
I just
amazing.
haven't revisited it in a long
Yeah.
time, so
Yeah.
there might be some of that stuff forthcoming.
All right. So, thank you. And we'll see you next time.
Alonzi.